All right, I will go ahead and just plop this on the Twitters real quick. I'll exit over on Twitter. All right, where's live stream? Live stream, live now. Very good. We get ready for the codes, yeah? So I have a very specific plan for today. Well, plan's a strong word. Well, more importantly, plan is a four-letter word. I don't use words like that. Huh. Let me see, let me see, let me see. Where did my face go? I'm looking for my YouTube feed to put that in the Twitter link you do. If only I could find myself. There we go. Copy video URL, pasty pasty. You tubby. Okay, apparently I need to be getting Adventures of Elliot. I'm finding out. Let me go make sure I've got that on my Deku deals. Is it coming out later? Interesting. Okay, that's not what I'm here for. I got distracted. I'm sorry. Getting back on target for the last minute before we launch. Is everyone prepared for launch? Please strap in to your seatbelts now. Okay. Where'd this mobile go? I need to put this in the... Where's live? I used to have this... Where'd the live channel go? Live... Oh, there it is. Oh, live stream. Oh, there, yeah. Okay. Boom. Whoops. Oh, whoops. We're supposed to go. All right, going live. We're going live. All right, I'm refreshing this. I'm refreshing this. I'm refreshing this, making sure that all of our whatchamadoodles are good to go. All right, number 13, lucky number 13. All right, we got some watchers. Hello, watchers. How you doing? And hopefully that's not just my previews of myself, but it might be. And if it is, then oh well. Okay, so what we've got to do here is basically just add some auth. I did some work off camera, which I know I was trying not to do, but I did. I will go over it a little bit. Let's see. Just kind of as we go here, I'll go over it. Nope, that one's already taken. Let me go over here. I'm going to lower the volume for myself. All right, so if we look at git status, what you can see is that I've created this basic auth file and I've made some changes to api.go and tlsrouter.go. I think that was it. I think that's all I've done. So if we take a look at this basic auth file, there's nothing surprising in here. I just created a basic auth verifier that takes a string, or has a function that takes a string for username, password, returns a Boolean, and it can serialize a JSON error, which we still haven't put JSON errors into the API, so that'll probably just move there. And then it's got a verify function that just takes the SHA-SUM of the known password and takes a SHA-SUM of the digest, and that's that. Let me think about this. Hold on. Was there something else I needed to do here? The vault. Okay, I may have made an oopsie doopsie in the way that the vault is working. I need to go double check on that. But anyway, yeah. So we just wrap the auth password, which is just a new type of string. We just wrap it so we can stick this verify function on it. And then we just ignore the username and we just take the password because it's really just a token. And then we just compare the high entropy token, the known, against the digest. And then that's that. That's all we do. Okay. So with that out of the way, we're going to figure out where to put this. So I extended the JSON file a little bit. So if we go to this JSON file, we can see now we have admin username and admin token. And right now we're just ignoring admin username. And then we've got our admin token there. So that allows me now to have that as part of the config. So whoops, that's not what I want to do. We'll look at the Go file. So we look at the config. I did make a few changes, some of which I don't think I'm going to keep because it's stupid. So I created this config DNS common so that I could embed it in both the config admin and the config DNS, because basically there's just a couple of things that the config admin just need these two extra properties, and I don't want the object that represents this to have those two extra properties when it doesn't need it for the config DNS. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just move these two properties, the comment and the X domains. I think I'm just going to move that up to the config DNS comment, or rather move it all back down to the config DNS, and just embed the config DNS in the config admin, because the config admin needs a DNS config, but blah, 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 blah. Okay. That's for the Let's Encrypt. The admin portion needs to be able to get the certificates for Let's Encrypt. That's the reason that that's there. Okay. So that change I made, and then in the place where the thing that I might need to undo, because I just realized that I think I did it wrong, I have to see, is where was the vault? There was like a to vault URI. Okay, yes. So this takes the new DNS token. I should probably call this something like URI. All right, there we go, URI. Okay, great. But then the problem that we have here, the thing I did wrong, I need to fix this in two places actually. So we can call that's the DNS token. So we have our little vault thing back from a while ago, where basically it just says if this looks like a vault string, meaning that it's prefixed with vault : // then just return it. Otherwise, save the string in the vault and then change the string. And then what I did here was I just checked to see, okay, was the vault string that it got back the same as the string that was in the config? And if not, then save the config. So this way, basically I can paste the non-vaulted strings into the config file, and then the very first time I run it, it's going to replace the config file with the vaulted strings. So that's all that's doing. It's just making so that I can commit this config file. Like the config file doesn't have any secrets in it. That's all I'm doing, is I'm making it so that the config file has some environment stuff in it, but not secrets. Could we get rid of the environment stuff out of the config file? Maybe, kind of, sort of. I don't know. But I definitely don't want the config file to actually have the secrets in it. Because I want to be able to show the production config file on stream in some cases. Well, I don't know if I'll actually be showing the production config file on stream, but I just, that's the way I like to do it. I like to separate things that are config from things that are secrets. And I think that's pretty well respected in the industry. Anyway, so we're going to do this, bum. We're going to do this, bum. All right, so now it's clear that that's URI. But then the problem that I have is I need a way to retrieve this, which I don't think I currently have. So if I do tab vault, get, okay, here we go, get. Yes, so I need this thing, Bob, right here. And I'm going to show you where this gets complicated. That's probably the next place that we're going to go, actually. So if you remember, we were working on a config API. And so it's like api.config. There we go. So this part of the code right here. We do this setup for these handlers. And then previously, I didn't have this conf.require token in front. And actually, we're going to remove that right now. So we're going to revert it to what it looked like previously, because I realized that that's not going to work, and I'll explain why in just a moment. By the way, how y'all doing? Feel free to say hello and ask questions. So we're not going to wrap these in middleware, and the reason is that, especially because I want to get this thing into production quickly, and I don't want to have to finish up all my grand ideas that I had for how the config API was going to work, I want, in the worst case, to just be able to say, hey, reread your config file and apply that in place instantaneously. And there's some problems with that because you run into some state management issues and whatnot, but we'll deal with that over time. I don't need to deal with it all right now. I just need to get this ready so that I can start using it right now. And the way that I could start using it right now is just if I can rewrite the whole config file every time. Although we might get to the one API that I need to add a new service or a new app. I need to be able to add a new app or a new service. Yeah, there needs to be get apps with an ID, and there needs to be a post apps. And I guess even a put apps would be all right. Anyway, so the problem with this is that there's no authentication on here. There's a couple of problems with this, but one of them is that there's no authentication on here, and so we want to fix that. So that's what we're after right now. So I'm going to go back to that require token, and we're going to change this up a little bit because we're not going to have it be like a middleware. Instead, we're just going to have it be a handler and have it return basically, let's see, there was an okay, if not okay or not, return. And I guess we don't, do we need the writer? Yeah, we need the writer. So we need to return a bool or an error. I'm not sure which we need to return. I guess it would be good if we created an error and then handed the error to the JSON error thing. But for right now, let's just make this a bool. And if we do this, then or let's return a string. Let's return a string. So if this is good, we're going to return the username. Otherwise, if this is bad, then we're going to return nothing. Otherwise, we're going to return username. So that's how we're going to do it at the moment. So, and then we need to give this thing a name, and it's going to be, I guess it's still going to be require token. and it's still a function. So it's just going to be like this. And I guess we could just do okay. All right, I'm going to go back to the bool idea. So we're going to do bool. So in this case, we're returning false. In this case, we're returning true. So require token. If okay, then we had the token and it was valid. Not okay, we didn't have the token or it wasn't valid. All right. But, yes, there's this little bit right here that was our problem, is that we need tabvault.get ID, and then the ID for this is going to be this one right here. And then the admin token is going to be this thingamabob, which now I don't even know that I like that I did this new type on it. That seems like meh. However, I do like that there's no ambiguity here because we're passing in the username and the password that we got there. So I do like that part. So we got our admin token. Okay, there we go. So what we're going to need to do, and this is more on the API side, so I may actually just move this over to the API side. In fact, I think I will do that right now. So we're going to go over to the API side, and I don't have these things separated out in a really clear, beautiful way yet. Okay. But basically what we're going to do in each of these is say lt load, whoops, okay. So we'll do this. Load config, and then we're going to do conf dot require token WR like this. And then we're going to have okay. So if not okay, return. So we're just going to put that in every single one of these things here after the mutex lock. So we're going to have that here. We're going to have it here. I wonder if this is actually go before the lock. Let me see. Why does it have the lock here? I don't know why it has the lock here. Because that seems like it should be for the new one. Okay. And the reason that we're doing this, so we're going to load the config. This is the tricky part that I was going to explain. So we're going to load the config, and the reason that we're loading the config here is the config may change at any time because we might send a signal to the process so that it rereads its config from the file system. And none of this admin stuff is part of the happy path. Admin stuff does not need to be optimized. It doesn't need to handle a lot of requests. We can have mutexes. We can have slower access to things. You know, we're talking microseconds for something where there's milliseconds of latency and there's only going to be one or two things that are looking at these values. Anyway, so, and let me see, how'd this go? Conf new conf equals conf. All right. So that became like that. That's fine. I'm going to do curconf. Can we do curconf? Just so that we're not getting messed up. Okay, so this is old conf. So we don't actually need the old conf here. We can just have that be curconf. Curconf. Okay, and that one as well would be curconf. Curconf. All right. I'm gonna have to spend more time thinking about how this will really work. So basically there's a few different methods by which the config will be updated. So we can update the config in place. We can start a new listener that has a new config, close the old listener, but keep it active for active connections, and the new listener will stay active. Or we just completely restart the service. So those are 3 of the ways in which this can work. Originally, I was thinking that the idea of just closing out the service or just restarting the service with the new config was a good idea. The problem is that for HTTP connections, that works pretty well because we can pretty well determine when an HTTP connection was done, or at least when it's idle. Because if the server hasn't sent any response, and so if the server was the last thing to reply, and the server hasn't sent a response in 5 seconds, then the connection's idle. And we can get tighter on that. We could say 1 second. Or I guess that there's not been a request. What's the right way to phrase this? So there's activity on the request side and there's activity on the response side. If the activity on the response side is what is most recent, and then the request side and the response side are dormant for at least 5 seconds, we can consider the connection to be idle. There are some cases where that's not true, like a long-running database query. But when you get more into the HTTP specifics, you can know that a request response cycle is complete. So anyway, the point is, when you gracefully shut down an HTTP listener, it will gracefully shut down and it will do the right thing. And then you can just be more aggressive with your idle time over time. So, the first few seconds, you can say if it's been 5 seconds, then after that, you can cut it down to 2 seconds. After that, you can cut it down to 1 second. And then after 15 minutes, you can say, okay, whatever you're doing, you're done. And HTTP is pretty resilient. If it was a download that was taking 6 days, it's just going to start up the connection again. It's going to be fine. It's not going to break anything. If it was a SQL query that didn't complete, that might be a little bit more difficult because the front end may need to send a request again or whatever. But point being, it's easier. But when you're looking at something like Samba, or you're looking at a something or SSH or something that's got a TCP connection that doesn't have something, or when it's just end-to-end encrypted, like let's say it's HTTP but it's end-to-end encrypted, well, you don't know for sure what it is. You can look at the ALPN and say, oh well, it's probably HTTP because it says it's HTTP, but you don't really know what's going on. And so yeah, so we need to handle things as gracefully as we can, and not, we don't want to start a new listener and close the old listener, because SSH connections last for days. Samba connections last for days, and we just don't know when is the right time to end a connection. We want it to be as reliable as possible. Now, hopefully we're not updating things very frequently where we need to do that, but in reality we are, especially as we add new things. And that's another thing. We can that's another option that I didn't put on the table yet, is that we can have something in place where we use a sync data type that is basically an add only data type. So that's a possibility too. Anyway, it seems like the best thing to do is to replace the config and have as little state as possible. And that is why I wanted to have it so that when we're doing these requests, we are getting an atomic view of the config as it is at the time of the request, and not have the handler itself. Because I think that the handlers, we're not going to change the handlers unless we redeploy the code. So what I mean by that is, let me go back in here. These handlers, they're not going to change unless we redeploy the code, which is another problem with this conf and handler thing existing in the way that it does. So I need to make sure that all of these, I think I want to prefix all of these with route, just so that I know that I get them all. So then if I go back over here, I can look at this from a perspective of route close clients, route close remotes. And then there are some things here that, let's see. I need to make sure that the auth is added in all of these places. And that's part of why I wanted to do this, so I could grep through and then see, okay, is the auth there? And actually, I want to do this a little bit differently than I've done it even. Let me go back up to the top here. Okay, there's a require token. Here's route get config. I actually want to do this before we lock. No, I don't. I don't want to do it before we lock. I just want to have the routes. We only can get one route at a time because we're just always going to lock. 100% of the time, we're just going to lock. Even if we don't need the lock for any other reason, we're just going to lock. Okay, so that's the same code, right? Yeah, okay. All right, so let me go back. New mu.lock. So route get config, route get new config. Just going to prefix all these things with route. Route set new config. Route list services. Route set service. And then here, we're going to do the same thing. List connections. Technically, we don't need the mutex lot here. Okay, I think that's fine. Okay. All right, so we're putting the token check in each of those, and a lot of times I prefer a more middleware approach with this, but the problem with the middleware approach is the way that I want to load the config. I don't want to load a single instance of config ahead of time. That's why I'm going with this approach. All right. So in this case, I should be able to look at route and see. Okay, let me think. What's the negative effect if we load a config after the mutex? Most of these cases, it won't matter, because this is an atomic operation anyway. And I don't think that we ever change the config. We always just create a new config. So in theory, when we're creating a new config, a deep copy of a new config, in theory, it wouldn't matter if it's being accessed by something else because it's not going to be written, but I'm just going to leave that mutex lock there for now. And I might put the mutex lock in the other places as well. So get new config. All right, so let me start at the top. Route get config. Has route, has the lock. And also what I should probably do is even this. So we'll do this. All right, require token is not a route. That's fine. I could probably even lowercase this because it's not going to go outside of here. All right, so I can just lowercase require token. It's prefixed with route. It's got the mutex. It's got the load config. Want to see things? Same thing here. It's got the mutex. It's got the load config. Has it got the mutex? It's got the mutex. It's got the load config. It's named route. It's got the mutex. It's got the load config. It's named route. It's got the mutex. It's got the load config. It's named route. It does not have the mutex. We'll just add the mutex in here. Not strictly necessary. Just for consistency. All right. And then, so that was named route. Same thing. This one's named route. And we'll just put this in here as well. There. Okay, and then this next one, it's prefixed with route. What was this? Not necessary for closing clients. What are y'all up to, by the way? All right, and then next thing is back up to the top. Okay, so that was all of them. So if everything is correct, then what I should see here is when I save here, I shouldn't get any errors. All of these are now handled in the same way. What I do need to figure out, however, is moving that handler up to the listen config. So basically this all should be lc.handler. Handler should not get set to the config, but let's see what this looks like. All right, let's see where listen config is made. Listen config. Do we have a new for that? Listen config is a big, huge struct. New listen config. All right. Oh yeah, that makes sense. That should get moved down to listener. Hey, what's up, Terrace? How's it going? All right, so from new listener, we pass in config, and we should probably also pass in handler, which should be HTTP serve mux. Glad to hear that you're doing good. How's progress on Git stacks? Okay. So, yeah, I think that the handler updated website landing page, great, and fixing bugs for coworkers. That's awesome. That's so cool that your team is on board with you and likes what you're doing. You did a company-wide presentation. Nice. That's so great. Yeah, my experience, I mean, I guess I'm an outspoken person and not really a people person, so I've got some things going against me there, or myself going against me there. But I have found that it's really, really hard to get people to believe in something, right? Like, it just, people like to drink the Kool-Aid they've been drinking. And even when you're someone that is like in a trusted community, people don't like to switch Kool-Aid. So there's a number of things I've introduced to people that I guess I don't really try to convince them to use it per se. But I'll try to show some things, and if I get lucky, then people like it. But I definitely have found you can't convince people. They have to want to convince themselves, I guess. Like, you can't argue the merits of something. Yeah, I totally relate to it. Quality marketing materials is key. Yep. One thing I haven't put a lot of effort into recently, but I need to get back to at some point, is webinstall.dev, because I know that there's two key things, Fish and GH. The latest versions of Fish and GH are not working on webinstall.dev because the maintainers changed the package structure. And I don't know why. I guess because I'm so busy with other things right now, I haven't gotten back to it. And it hasn't been a problem for any of the people that I like personally work with, other than, with Fish, I'm just use version 3, because there's no difference between version 3 and version 4 other than version 4 is written in Rust. Like, there's no benefit to you as the user of Fish to use Fish 4. It's just, well, they rewrote it in Rust. Cool. But it's not like, oh, there's a mountain of new features. They literally just rewrote it in Rust. Now, I'm sure over the next year, they're going to add new features they've been holding off on adding. Maybe they've already done that. But I don't know that there's anything that I'm going to notice. So, anyway. New listen config. Handler. All right, let's see what goes on here. Yeah, so new listen config gets passed in. The config gets passed in as a copy. So no changes after new listen config is called are going to have any effect. And then at the listen and proxy thing here, we really should have the handler be passed in at that point, actually. I think this is where the handler should get passed in. This is where we should have our mux http.serve mux, like that, I think. How does listen and serve work with HTTP currently? Let's go take a look at that. Listen and serve. We give it an address and we give it a mux. So listen and proxy, ideally we should do the same thing. We should give it an address and give it a mux. And so then all this conf.handler stuff goes away. And that just gets replaced with mux. Okay, I like that. I think that that's the right thing to do. So now I just got to make sure that there's no other place, okay, where we have conf.handler here, so then we would just have mux. Serve HTTP, in which case we can just reduce this to what it was before. This is another thing that I changed because I thought, well, if the handler's gonna hinge off of the conf, then we need to have this wrapper so that we can make sure we're loading the correct conf. But now that's not the case anymore, which means that this can just go back to being mux, which is what it was before, because before it was just conf.handler and the bit that I did off stream. And so now that just goes to being mux, and now we don't handle conf anywhere inside of here at all, which is great. This is the better way. Okay, I definitely feel better about this. So then we got to go into command TLS router main. We need to say, hey, that handler that you're setting, don't do it. There is a problem here we have with the setup router, though. This probably needs to take in mux as star http.serve mux, which means that we don't have that, which I guess create handler status. So we do need that still for that one reason. When we set up router, we'll just set up the mux like this. So that's probably safe to do this way. But then we would pass the mux in here like that. No, not like that. New listen config. All right, maybe not. So setup conf. So where is our listen and proxy? That's here in this start bit. Okay, and the problem here is that now we have to find a way to pass in this mux. So let's go try to look at where start is. I think this is one of the reasons I decided to put it in where I did. Okay, so we can do all that. All right, start is going to need to have mux http.serve mux. Okay, now let me keep looking. Hello, what's up, Wucha? How's it going? How are things coming along with the plugin that you I forget the name of the sound plugin. What's it called? It's called Upgrade to Pro. BT Dubs, I think you should totally put the name of the plugin back up at the top here. What is the name of the plugin? What is the name of the plugin? We need to have whoops. We need to have that link to the website and the thing that says what the name of it is. Sound Hub, right? Anyway, web install looks cool. Yes, Webby does work on Alpine. if there are a couple of things that might still have an issue on Alpine, so if you do encounter something, let me know. Like reach out personally to me on Discord would be a good way to go about it, as well as filing a bug on GitHub. But there are so many bots doing stuff on GitHub that I've pretty much abandoned GitHub because it's not useful. Like it's just anxiety inducing. I need a Xanax in order to get on GitHub because the bots are just out of control. And it's just really ruined my experience as a developer, as a maintainer rather. Because there's just like so many bot issues. I mean, that's what gave me fatigue working on Webby, was that like every day, like 3 new issues open and they're all just bots with AI garbage, just nonsense. Would it reinstall for new versions? So Webby, I don't know what you mean by that. Would it reinstall for new versions? So Webby is kind of just a curl script. So it installs every time you use it, because every time you use it, it fetches the script in order to run the installer, and as part of the script that runs the installer is Webby itself. So every time you use it, it effectively downloads itself again. Yeah. I'm on the market of offering install to Linux users that don't want brew on their system. Yeah. So Webby does not fill the same niche as brew, but it fills a similar niche. So Webby is meant for modern tools, and where brew really shines is ancient garbage, right? Or ancient gold, depending on how you want to look at it. Like if you want to install, well, I would say FFmpeg, except FFmpeg is now on Webby, although it's not the official version. It is, well, it's a version listed on the official website, but it's not maintained by the maintainers, because the maintainers, a lot of people in open source that are from the old school do not believe in binary distribution, which is a real pity. But that's the era they grew up in. That's the beliefs that they hold. And so a lot of maintainers for ancient tools, the reason that we have brew is that the maintainers don't use GitHub Actions or Go Releaser or something else that just does all the work to do the releases for them. So that's where there's a problem. If I already had Stackits installed and I run Webby install stacks, will it remove the old version, install the new one? So it will not remove the old one. It will install the new one. So one of the things with Webby is that I don't want things that we're working to break. So when you run Webby, like let's say you run Webby stacks at well, let's say you just run Webby stacks. It's going to get whatever the stable version is. If you run Webby stacks at 1.2, it's going to install version 1.2 and then symlink the current version to 1.2. But if you run Webby stacks at latest again, then it's just going to resymlink. So it does keep a cache of whatever it's downloaded, stays downloaded, and whatever you install stays installed, and it just symlinks to switch. And that provides the best mix of stability and recency that I know how to provide without having intimate knowledge of, every particular thing. But if you're using GitHub releases, then it's very easy to just find something for stacks that is similar to the way that stacks is packaged. So, you can just look for something that's written in the same language, that's released with the same tool, and then you can just copy that config, and it's really just about what the layout is in the tarball that gets uploaded to GitHub, whether it's bare, meaning it's just the binary with a Z standard or XZ or GZ extension, or if it's in a tarball, or if it's in a zip, if it's the only child in that, or if there's a folder structure. So it's just a matter of, it's going to look at GitHub releases and choose the correct release based on the server side logic, because Webby sends a user agent string that has operating system, architecture, toolchain, like Muscle or GNU or WinSysGit or whatever it is, MSys, whatever. It detects those three things, your target host triplet, then it will get the right package from GitHub. And then the installer part is really just saying, it's really just like 3 to 5 lines of how do I unpack it and define what the location is. Yeah. Does Webby mark in any way that the binary was installed by Webby? No, it just is like, if the folder's there, then it doesn't need to reinstall it. Right? So if it checks to see if it's in the right location and it's in the right location, then it's in the right location. So there is no package management. It is strictly, it installs. That's all it does. It downloads the right thing and it installs it. And if you wanted to see, well, what's been installed by Webby, there's no way to know. You can list your .local folder and .local opt. So you could list .local bin and .local opt. And if you've been using Webby and you haven't been using something else, there's a high probability that whatever's there is because of Webby. But there is no, like, this is the Webby version. It's just whatever version is released via the releases API. And that's not just GitHub. That's whatever releases API. So there are a few common releases API, Git, GitHub, GitLab. And then there are some bespoke releases APIs. So Zig, Go, Node, where there's actually JavaScript that's specifically for that releases API. What do you mean, why HTTP, not HTTPS? What do you mean? What are you talking about? So when I just vocally say HTTP, most of the time what I mean is HTTPS. If you're asking why am I on the Go package for HTTP, HTTPS doesn't exist. HTTPS is just a word that we use to describe that the TCP connection is using TLS. But HTTPS doesn't exist because they're two separate protocols that are unrelated and don't know anything about each other. So when we say HTTPS, it's just a colloquialism. There's no such thing as HTTPS. There's connecting to HTTP over a TCP connection, and there's connecting to HTTP over a TLS connection. But there is no HTTPS to speak of. So when I say HTTP, usually I mean HTTPS because I don't use HTTP over raw TCP except for when it's a reverse proxy type scenario, like localhost or something like that, where there's not a clear benefit, or there's clearly additional complexity that's not helpful. Okay. All right, so now we got this thing. Okay, and then we got this thing here too, and so now I need a mux. But then I got to do the same thing that was done here. Okay, so is this exactly the same? Are these exactly the same steps? I think they are. I think if I take this, I actually am going to do this. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to indent it. I'm going to move, or I'm going to remove conf.handler because that's not a thing. I'm going to put mux in here. And now if I overlay these on top of each other, what I'm expecting is that there's actually no change at all. Okay, there is a change because this is using LC2. Got it. Got it. And it needs to be LC2 because there's a shutdown here. All right, cool. All right, so now I think I fixed everything that I just broke. So that's good. So now I think I've gone over everything that I changed off screen, which wasn't really that much and was also just done here on screen as well. In fact, let me do one more of those things. So let's do that config DNS comment. This was stupid. We're just gonna take all of this back into here, and then we're just gonna call this config DNS like that. And then we have to go change a couple of places where we have DNS common. We just have to change those back to config DNS. And then this actually just becomes, this would just need to become a copy. So now we make a copy. And do I want it to be a copy or do I want it to be a reference? I think I do want it to be a copy. This is one of those things that becomes really difficult. This is something that really does need to be, I don't know, it's because we have this thing that's DNS conf by domain, and this gets set up part of new listen config. And so we kind of think of it like, oh, well, we're only going to ever update it. We're never going to change it. So we don't need to have any mutexes around it. But then that might not be entirely true. It may actually need mutexes around it, but I just don't want mutexes around it when things are running. I don't mind just the special case of, okay, we have to reconfigure it. So something's kicked off a reconfiguration. But then the problem is when we have to use it, because DNS conf by domain, DNS conf is entirely for the Let's Encrypt processes. There's really a side channel to all of this. And so it's fine if that has mutexes because it's not going to affect actual connections because the connections aren't dependent on DNS conf by domain, I think. Let me double check on that. Yeah, so this is all in the big giant new listen config. Okay, and if we look at this, let me take this all the way down to the bottom. Yeah, that's all part of the new listen config. Now we must never modify conf again. Yeah. So it's pretty important that conf not be modified. Now, when we load conf, that's different. But the problem here is that when we apply a new config, we need to redo some of this stuff. So yeah, I gotta rethink through that because I had initially approached it with this idea of instead of using mutexes that lock, I'm just going to do all the setup on new listen config and then we're just going to have a new listener whenever we need it. Now I need to modify that slightly, and that there may be that I want to be able to use atomics and just be able to do an atomic load. And I think that the atomic load is going to be better performance than the mutexes. Not that I really need to worry about that right now, but I kind of do need to worry about that. Because it becomes a problem. Okay. So then, where am I sitting right now? Off camera, I'm gonna have to do a major refactor of this. And why I say off camera is because there is some performative pressure by being live, even when it's only a handful of friends watching. And I'm going to need some time to myself to be able to think stupid thoughts to come up with better solutions for this. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but it's like with everything, as the complexity grows, it just never feels good. It always feels nasty. I start to feel stupid. There are certain things that I know exactly, that are already predefined. When you're dealing at the HTTP layer, it's really, really easy to get that right. When you're dealing with state management between TLS configs and Let's Encrypt was never really easy to begin with. And it has some state management that kind of Anyway. Oh. We also don't need this. Let me get rid of that. Yeah, that was never used. That was just a thought that I had. Okay, we can get rid of that. Okay, so let's look at this. So instead of being a config DNS, we change that to being a config admin, and we embed config DNS in it, but then we have a couple of extra bits in there. We've already talked about that. We just removed some of the config DNS struct stuff around. I guess we don't really need to for the purposes of keeping the git diff clean. I think I'll move comment and disabled back up and then X domains back up. So let me go do that real quick. X domains below domains, disabled, and comment. Let's see if that looks right now. Yeah, now that totally took the other one out of the picture, which is great. We do have the transition from Let's Encrypt staging to Let's Encrypt production. I kind of want that to be its own commit, not part of this. Actually, I want that to be configurable, but for right now, that's fine. Okay, we changed some stuff about this so that not only is it putting it in the vault and getting the vault URI, it's also saving the config. We added some of this admin stuff. We changed listen and proxy so that the mux is passed in instead of set up internally. Okay, so now we're down to very few changes to this, which is what I really wanted it to be. And now the changes that we're down to in API.go are very simple by comparison. So we added a require token, and then we renamed everything with route get, and we renamed all of the config loads, and we made sure that every single one of them has a config load, and that they also call require token. And they all have a mutex lock, even if they don't need it, just for consistency, because basically when I copy and paste one of these functions, I want to copy and paste the mutex lock and the require token. And we renamed everything with a route so that we could more easily identify it. So I feel really good about those changes now. They feel really simple and really clean comparatively. I will say this. I'm going to move that out. just so that I can look at this in isolation and it really be a focused commit. So when I look at that again, so there's kind of two related things that are going on here, is that we're adding auth and extracting the mux. So let's go take a look at TLS Router here and make sure that that follows suit, that it's a really simple change. And it looks like it is. Okay, I feel really, that's, for all the work that was done here, that commit just seems really, really simple. And I do like that. Oh, and then we added basic auth. Was there anything else that we added here? Star.go. Yeah. So this is very easy. Okay, cool. Now I haven't actually tested that yet, so we should probably test it before I push that commit. So let's go ahead and fail this one. All right, there we go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and fail that. Copy this over. Oh, whoopsie daisies. There's actually one thing that I do need to move back in there real quick. So the directory endpoint there, we're just going to go ahead and remove that. Directory endpoint. I wonder if there's a 0 SSL on here as well. Does that work? Really? Yeah, look at that. I'd be really interested to see what those things are. I wish I'd known that the other day when I was testing this, or had thought of it, because I think I did know it. I bet this has staging as well. Let's go take a look at Cert Magic real quick. Oh, wow. Google does this now? What? Google has their own Let's Encrypt. Who knew? Oh, okay. This might be much more complicated. Okay, external binding. Yeah, that one's going to be much more complicated. Let's see. Okay. And I see what they're doing there, because subdomains is how the spammers get you. You know, it's like awesome.com, .good.com, .evil.com. Yeah, okay, so it's got EAB credentials. Okay, so we wouldn't want to use that. Let's encrypt is the way to go. All right, so that's copied over. Let's run this and see if it runs. And then another thing I want to see is, did it change the config file? Yes, it did. There we go. So now that's vaulted. Excellent. Okay. I kind of want to rename that to DNS API and DNS API token. Okay. I probably need, take a look at that. Hold on. Let me just take a look at that again real quick. So let's run that again. Okay. And then look at this again. All right. So it kept it out. It didn't rewrite the empty ones. Okay. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and run this. And let's make sure that we can still connect to everything that we were able to connect to before. In particular, I want to see if I can SSH into this. Where was the SSH modoodle? All right, there we go. All right, cool. Nope, that did not work. Whoopsie daisies. I'm looking away for a second. I gotta look at some SSH config for a thing. Okay, that looks right. Okay, that wasn't updated. Okay, let's see if this works. Nope, that did not work. I'm very confused now. Okay, there's definitely a host match there. I think I got a cached session where there shouldn't be. There we go. Let's get rid of that. Okay. All right, there we go. Now we see nothing matched, blah, blah, blah. All right, that's because of a bug in the S client, I think. Now we do have a problem that this connection is not being closed. So when we got to no TLS config or backend, we should have gotten to the point where this was just automatically closed. So let me check into that real quick, because that's something that I do want to distinguish between, like there was an oops-a-daisy and it's just taking a long time because it's like generating SSH keys or going through a TCP send flood attack or something like that. All right, so no TLS config. Okay, so if that had an error, and that's returning, okay, what is this here? Isn't this the big proxy function? Yeah, it's the big proxy function. Okay. So handshake failed. No TLS config versus slow match. That's fine. All right, so I'm a little confused as to why that didn't close. Don't we have a defer here? All right, let me check for other defers. Oh, we just have that defer there. All right, so let's say we call the proxy function here. Let's try that. Yeah, I think we didn't want to close it because there are cases where closing it would do the wrong thing. They would close it too early. So here we do have an error. And there we have an error. And there, that's going to get closed automatically. Okay. Okay. All right, so let's re-roll that. And now when I connect to this, it should, okay, good. Now it fails immediately, which is what I want. Okay, good. And I need to have the special version. So I've got a version of S Client that I have not officially released yet, only because I didn't realize the bug. Until just now, or until yesterday. I had suspected it earlier, but okay, great. Yeah, so a while back, maybe 2 years ago. Yeah, okay, so I added this ALPN feature. It turns out that I didn't. And it turns out there was a bug in the other software that I was using that it turned out that this being broken worked. But now that I've got my own TLS router and everything, I actually need it to be correct because I am handling it correctly. So maybe it wasn't a bug, maybe it was a configuration error. But anyway, yeah. So I realized that a while ago. I thought, I think something's not quite right here. And then, let's see, projects, root, S client. Okay, S client's already here, so good. So projects. All right, so first pop, 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 pop. Okay, so now if I run this again, what? Now it should be working. Okay. That's not right. Huh. Well, I was testing this yesterday and it was working. Okay, cool. All right, there we go. I was just reading the wrong config. There was a issue of the priority of the config. Okay, and for some reason, which I think is related to the instance, it takes a really long time for an SSH connection to be established. But I think that has something to do with maybe key generation, or I don't really know. But I think it's something to do with a container. Because it'll sit here for like 10 seconds. I'm on a terminal on the other display. Okay, and it worked. All right, cool. So we're all good. Yeah, and then once it gets connected, then I've got, essentially no latency. All right. Okay. Cool. And then what I need to do is I need to actually test that I can get the config. So let me do, let's see, star.sh, get config. All right, let's see this. I didn't really need to stop that. Okay, let me start it back up again. All right, so let's take a look at the config. And what have we got? tls2.m.bnna.net. That is our little test spot here. And then we got our admin token. So what I need to do then is I need to say, boom, that. And so then we're going to do this madoodle. Okay. Boom. And then we also need to do take a look at our vault here. So that is our admin value at the moment. There we go. All right, so in theory, this will work. Now remember, in theory and practice are the same, but in practice, they're different. Is it not B? It is B. Okay. Yeah, I didn't think that was on that domain. Okay, but I need to correct that typo over here as well. Oops, not that one. Okay. Let's see. No config matches. Blah, 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 blah. All right. Let's see if this will work like this. Ooh, we got problems. Oh, we got problems. Well, oopsie daisies, because we had everything working nice and well, and now we screwed it all up. All right. Cert magic config is brokenated. I think I know why, though. I think if we just restart it, it may just work again, and that's a problem that I got to figure out in kind of a side channel. Nope. Okay. Well, that's better news. I regret that the output for this is yo yo yo, because it turns out that actually isn't super duper helpful. On a scale of 1 to best debug message ever, it falls a lot closer to 0. Okay, nil pointer dereference. Let's figure out where this is happening. Get certificate with context, handshake, .go, get certificate. So let's see if we can trace it back to our code. That's one thing that I wish that there were better stack trace tools for, is highlighting, and this is where your code comes in, you know? All right, TLS router 992. Let's take a look and see what we see, CC. I wonder what that is. Huh. Maybe it was the other phone. In addition to my iPhone, I now have an Android phone because I'm replacing Twilio with an Android phone. Okay, what am I doing? I'm trying to figure out set number 992. TLS handshake is where this originates from. Okay, so let's see if we can find. All right, yo, yo, yo. Let's see if we can find yo, yo, yo. My best debug message of all time. Okay, so we should not have a domain config missing at this point. That should not be possible. I think I know the recent change I made. It was actually in the last stream. I made a change to this because I was very confused by the logic. And I thought, surely this logic must be Borkin. Now I'm starting to wonder if maybe, because yeah, right here. So right here, there was logic that looked to be Borkin. And maybe this didn't need an else. Okay, so if there is no DNS config, then this is going to use TLS config. If there is no config, then okay, let me think about why that should or shouldn't be an else. So when it gets here, this must exist. So enabled domains is turned on here. So if it has DNS config, but it doesn't have this config, acmeconf DNS provider, that's going to be that magic. Enable domains is now set to true. Okay, I think that was not supposed to be an else. I think the problem originally here was that the continue was there. And I think that was maybe just copy pasta problem. Because the continue shouldn't be there because it still needs to execute this stuff below. So let me do this real quick. Okay, so there's basically a number of things that I want to do here. That I'm just going to do in tandem, or let's see, what was this one? And this one is get rid of that. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to git stash this. I'm going to open this back up, and I'm going to go to where the staging URL is. I'm going to paste in this madoodle, and then I am going to, yeah, where to do is still there because we want to make it configurable. But this is feet, or rather ref. Switch to prod directory or discovery endpoint. What is it called? Okay, there we go. I'm gonna get stash pop this. We're gonna see that that's modified. Okay, that's fine. All right. Then I'm gonna do the next one. I'm just gonna keep these commits nice and clean. So this next one is lc.proxy. Okay, fix. Propagate. Is it propagate like that? Is that how we spell it? How do we spell propagate? Propagate. Propagate. Yeah, propagate. Error to close connection. All right. Get that. Bulk modified, mumbo jumbo. Okay, and then okay, excellent. So that's all looking good. I'm gonna replace that yo with this. Okay, I'm gonna say that config should definitely be added to spell. We need to have a developer spell. All right, so that's good now. Whoa. Okay. There we go. Sanity fail. There we go. That's right. Okay, so now we're back here with this one. And we're just going to fix the else if, right? No, we already fixed it. Hey, everybody, how's it going? All right, so yeah, the problem here was in there. I introduced an else previously where I shouldn't have. So I'm going to rewrite some history on this one. Okay, so we go back down here. All right. So this one right here had a bunch of things in it. Yeah. And then this one actually ended up being correct. So once the outage, once the Let's Encrypt outage was over, this worked. That worked on the first try the next day. And I'm pretty sure that it was Chore LPN. Pretty sure it was that one right there. Came in that place. I think, I want to test this. If I were to move this up here, I think it's going to fail. Yeah, it's going to fail. All right. So there we go. So that's tested working. The question is, can I take this as it is and deploy it to production? The question is, can I deploy this to production and be able to make config changes without restarting? And I think the answer to that is no. I think that I'm still going to have to restart for now, but I can work on the rest of it later. So let me go to here. Let me try getting the config. All right, why is this griping? That shouldn't have happened. Oh, I didn't rebuild. I was going to say that should definitely not have happened, considering that I just fixed both bugs related to why that was happening. Okay, but missing Acme config for domain. All right, so that's good to know. So that else did not solve the problem. All right, so that is very confusing. Cert magic config map. What the world? CMCM? Was this supposed to be Acme? I want to get blame on that. A347? Okay, I don't know what that's supposed to mean. It looks like it might have been a typo. What's next to CMCM? I don't know. I don't know what that could have been. Anyway, cert magic conf blah 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 blah. So here's the thing right here. What are we looking at? What is the parent function here? I think this is the big builder mabob that goes through all the config. And this needs to be broken down because we need to have a way to update the config midstream. Like I actually want to have a proper function that's like, hey, replace the config. And so we're gonna have to rethink some things. We should basically be able to do new listen config and then have a set config function or something that can do good without breaking things. All right. Cert magic conf map. Domain DNS admin domains. Was that supposed to be admin or something? Yeah, it was supposed to be Acme. I don't know. But let's change it. I don't know what this means. So it's already in the config map. Whatever. Okay. Build config for admin domain. Issuer conf map. I'm just very confused by what I was doing here. Maybe I could have chosen better variable names or something. But the issuer config map, if we have an Acme conf, so if we don't have an Acme conf, can continue. But if we do have an Acme conf, then enable domains, blah, blah, blah. And then we're going to create a new cert magic. Okay. That seems kind of silly. Okay. Issuer conf map. For domains and admin domains. All right. Cert magic doesn't support multi-sand. That's really neither here nor there. Just gonna get rid of that in this instance. Well, I'll leave it there because I don't want to change things I don't need to change. Manage sync could not add bump to allow list. So that's if there's a DNS provider. So enabled domains. I think enabled domains basically needs to happen no matter what. Just make sure enabled domains means what I think it means. Looks like enabled domains is never ever used. So we could just get rid of it. Well, I'll leave it there for now. Okay, so it seems like enabled should have been basically the first thing no matter what. Okay, I think I don't know what to think here. I think we're duplicating some logic for this admin thing, and that's gonna kick me in the butt. I think that's what's happening here. Okay, there we go. So if we don't have a DNS config, I think that that's what needed to happen was that we we basically have the same thing here, right? Okay, what's the difference between these two? Could not add blah, blah, blah to the allow list. But wait, shouldn't that be in SNI ALPN matchers? Isn't that our problem? Is that whatever the admin domain is, it should end up in the SNI ALPN matchers? And we shouldn't really have to do something special here. I guess we kind of do, because it's not going to be of the same type, but it will be of the same type if this is what we're doing, right? Right? So I don't know. I'm a little confused. So let's take a look at the output here. By the way, feel free to chime in, ask questions, say hello, whatever you want to do there. All right. We are going to get, we should be seeing TLS2.bnna.net. Okay. We should have seen that it's going to terminate that up here. TLS2.b.bnna.net. All right. So load the domain. All right, so my question is, why didn't this make it into the SNI ALPN matchers? Okay, let's see what happens if I just move this up here. And I just say... What's the difference between these two? Can I turn these into a function? Because I think that there's no difference there. So I could take this whole thing and I could just wrap it. Like that. And then we basically have the same thing here. One thing I do want to do is get rid of all this to-do. Because I don't need that. So I'm going to get rid of this to-do. Because I think it's just messing me up here. Do I want to leave this? Maybe. I want to do uh-oh, what happened? Oops. So this is all admin domain stuff. So let me stash that real quick. I'm gonna rebasey this back to where. Okay, good. Get stash pop, and it's getting hot in here. It's 3, and it is. Well, it's only 80 degrees, but it feels hotter. I'm gonna go into the office in a bit here because it's just too hot to work in the shed. Oh. All right, I want to see if I can get this all cleaned up. All right, so we're going to take domain. We're going to hand back an error. All right. Is there anywhere else where error can happen here? Okay, and then here, if we make this a function, then we can just stop there, right? We don't need to check this again because we know for certain that that's been done. So if we make it a function, then that simplifies this a little bit. And then the only error that we might have, so then turn nil here. All right. We'll terminate TLS for this. We'll terminate TLS for that. And we can basically then just take this bit here. We don't need to worry about that at all. We take this whole thing And that did not cause any problem to just move that up. So I like this better. I don't know that I like that I just created a random function here to handle this. It seems like maybe I would want this to go somewhere else, maybe be part of this LC object. I don't know right now. But let's just check this out again. So, if the thing's already there, then let it be. Seems like a good step one. And just, we can flippy doodle this. We can flippy doodle that. Wait a second. I may have discovered another bug. All right, let's take a look. Okay, so let's paste that out. Okay, that's good. So that's better because we do need to make sure that we are managing anytime that we're adding in here. So these three actions should really just always go together. And then let's see what happens when we do this. And then we're going to change that to domain. But let's see if there's any difference in these, because I think now these should be the same, which means that we should have consistent behavior, which is what the problem was, is that we had inconsistent behavior. Okay, so now we have consistent behavior, and we found a bug before we created it by comparing line by line and making sure they were doing the same thing. So we don't need that. Oh, it's Portal. The orchestra is a lie. By the way, music's on OC Remix, in case that wasn't clear from the titles and the awesomeness. Okay, so if the thing is already configured, skip. If it doesn't have a DNS config, then use the TLS config and then add it, sync it, we're done. If okay, this seems redundant now. Because if we added it there, we're not going to need to catch it here. So now that's done because we do that first. So it kind of feels like, to me, it would feel better if we did this the other way. All right, let's see if this still makes sense. Because I think the reason it was convoluted before is because it wasn't in a function and we're trying to do it in a loop with continues and make that work right. All right. So if we've already configured it, then return nil because it's already enabled. This means we haven't configured it. So if it has the DNS config, which all we're dealing with right now is DNS config. So we don't need to say or custom config because right now you can't do a custom config, I don't think. Well, actually, I guess you kind of can, but okay, we'll call it DNS or custom config for now. All right. So if it has, no, we'll just call it DNS config for now. You can always update it later if we expand later. Okay. So if it has a DNS config, then we're going to configure it with DNS, which means that we're going to create a new cert magic based on some internal logic that we customize. That's going to give us a cert magic instance. We're going to load that into the cert magic conf map, which is the same one up here. We're going to set enabled domains, which now that we have a really easy way to do that and we don't know what the use case is, I just want to get rid of that because it's just more stuff. And now that it's all consolidated, if we needed to add that into here, we know exactly where to add it because that's easy. Cert magic doesn't, is that anywhere else? No, that's not anywhere else. Okay, so we can leave that note there because now it's only one place. Okay, so anyway, so we take it, we add it, and then we manage it. So this is the cert magic instance. We manage the cert magic instance with this context, which actually, I'm not sure that's the context that we really want to use. We probably want to use the config, the config instance context, not the server instance or the listener instance context, but we'll go with that for now. And we're going to pass in this domain. Now this comment actually makes sense. Why are we talking about doesn't support multi-SAN? Because we're seeing an array of domains here, but the array of domains is not actually multi-SAN. Okay, great. So that's done. So this whole block makes sense. Now, if this fails for some reason, which I don't think it's possible for it to fail in this context, because managed sync is just adding something to the whitelist, so it can't fail to add to the whitelist. Okay. Then, if it doesn't have a DNS config now, is the default case that it's going to use TLS ALPN. And when you use TSL ALPN, it's going to use a pre-configured single instance because the configuration for this instance is the same. Whereas with this has a different instance for every different instance of DNS provider. Okay. So in theory, okay, so okay, here's the weird thing that would be better to do. I think it would be better if we could have a single instance of cert magic per DNS provider config, but we're not doing that right now. Okay, does cert magic give us the ability to unmanage? Let's check that out real quick. I don't think there's a way to undo this. Okay. Yeah, so the bad news is the only way to undo this, and you don't find out what the consequences are for like 30 days, but the only way to undo this, I don't know how you undo this. How do you can you close an instance of certain magic or stop? Yeah, there doesn't appear to be a way to unmanage something. Maybe I'm just not seeing something. Okay, it's also got this on event, on demand. Reuse key source, cert selection. Storage. Huh. Hmm. Huh. 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 I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so I don't know how to unmanage. That worries me. Only a little bit, but a little bit. Okay, what does renew do? Okay, so maybe we don't need to manage. Okay, but it does not update the in-memory cache. So how do you update the in-memory cache? From storage. Okay. So I think what's happening here is that it's still only getting the certificate. So manage, I think really is only, let me see what manage async says. I think it's really only grabbing the certificate when the get certificate function is called, and that's when it's doing the renewal and doing the cache manage certificate. I think it's doing both of those as needed. So these lower level functions might actually be what I want. Okay, so get certificate runs in this order. All right. I might feel better about just implementing this myself, like taking a look at what this function is and just copying it, depending on how long it is and how many private private things it's trying to get. Okay, that's not. Yeah, as far as amount of code wise, but I don't see get certificate. Okay, it looks like I gotta use it that way. I don't know. But what I can say is that the logic is correct here in the happy path case. What I'm not sure about is if I delete something, will it still be renewed in the background? Renew managed certificates. Renews managed certificates, including ones loaded on demand. Note that this is done automatically on a regular basis. Normally when I call this method assumes non-interactive mode. Oh, remove managed. But that's from cache. What does our cache look like? Cert magic cache. Okay. Okay. All right. Is this not right? All right. So this is how we manage a certificate and how we unmanage it. All right. If the documentation here is correct. Okay. I might need to ask about that, but okay, I think that's right. Okay, so with that done, we've got a much simpler way of looking at these two things and seeing how similar they are. And with this, I suspect now that if we go build... Oh, whoops, that wouldn't have... See, upload failure. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's run this again, and then let's run this again, and I think that that's it for the day. All right, it should take 10, 15 seconds while it goes to get that certificate, and then we get invalid credentials, which is not what I expected. So let's just check them credentials. W66, blah, 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 blah. All right, so let's see. Do I have... Let's ignore the white space because that's going to drive me nuts. Oh, whoopsies, and I lost chat for a second. Let me check on chat. Heyo. Um... I don't want to call it enable. I want to call it register. This? Oh yeah, we got the Acme agreed, blah, 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 blah. Simplify and use Okay, cool. So let's push that up. I think we've already got that built, right? Oh, but what I want to do now is I want to check and see when verify is used. Let's look what P, U, and password all look like. All right, let's close this out. Put that back. Start that up again. And then let's just rerun git config, and we should see empty string. Okay. So that's not what I expected. Let's see if we can figure that out. What's up, Mahmood? Thanks for the sub. Okay, admin token. That shouldn't be possible for that git to fail. Let me just double check a couple things here. So admin token's definitely there. C7B. And if we look into the vault, C7B, it's definitely there. So that admin token's definitely in both places. Okay, so I had to look at something for a minute. All right, so the question is, why would the vault be returning the wrong thing for the get? Let's take a look and see what might be going on there. Okay. It's calling add. That's returning the string. If string has prefix, return S. 2 vault URI. Okay, a little confused. Error is not equal nil. Okay, but it's doing an add. Okay, what error could it have? It could have an error writing. Can't have an error when getting. All right, so let's just make sure where we're using tab vault. We're using it correctly. I think everything's good there. Okay. All right, let's do this. Print F, Q, Q, Q. We're not going to do that yet. We're going to do build. All right, going to restart it. And we're going to rerun the git and see if we can figure out what's going on here. All right. Oh. Let's see. Where are them secrets at? ID. All right, let's try that one. Hmm. 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 Oh, bless me. I'm wondering if in this one, when I called get, I'd already removed. Yeah. Okay, cut prefix. Okay, that's why that one was working, even though it seems like it wouldn't have been. All right, so let me break that, copy that, rerun this, and then rerun this. Okay, there we go, boom. Cool. And then just to make sure, because I like to make sure, if we just add X to the end of here, then we should get unauthorized, which is absolutely correct and amazing and exactly what we need. Okay, cool. So this is great. API is now protected for the time being. I'm going to have to make updates at after business hours. But now we're on the path. Like now we've got the full loop going and it's just a matter of API stuff. All of the pieces are together. So I'm not sure if I'm going to continue streaming this project or not at this point, because now the project is just, well, maybe I still will. I'll see. I'll see. But the project is now reached a point where it has legs. All of the pieces that need to be there are there. There's finesse that needs doing. But this is a thing now. I made TLS router a thing. All right, so we'll go into API here. Going to basic auth here, remove me. Okay. What? All right, so what have we done? Oh, we don't need to have that. Let me... Okay, so all we did was fix this. And then we could have also fixed that by, what was it, get, dot get. API token. Here, API token. Okay. All right, cool. So this is going to be fix vaults. Always trim vault prefix for IDs. Okay, cool. So let me rebuild this then. And that's going to fail because this is still running. All right, let's go ahead and run that. Now, if I get config, I should get the config back, which is excellent. And yeah, I'm not sure if I'm gonna we'll see. Oh, do I still maintain web install? Yes, I do. I just haven't done anything with it in a long time. Yeah, so most of the PRs and issues are garbage from bots. That's what I was saying earlier, is like I haven't checked it in a while because it just became so fatiguing. Like every day there were just junk issues from bots, and I've reported dozens of them. And they just keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. Like if you open up any random issue, most of it over the last year is just garbage. Before that, there's a lot of issues I had opened and other people have opened things that are just kind of like, well, maybe someday we'll get around to this. I know there's an issue with GH, and I know there's an issue with fish, and I know there's a PR for fish. Right now, like the last 6 months, have just been really tough in terms of I had to cut rates in order to fit the market. So now I have to work a lot more in order to make the same income. And so the last 6 months, I've really just been focused on doing projects that I have to do because I need them for something else I'm doing. Like this right here is directly going to translate into I'm going to be using it for some server stuff where I'm directly making money out of it. So I have to accept the PR, but you can take a look. Stacks wouldn't be similar to the homebrew one. You would just do a PR and you would have the file. So like, let's take a look real quick. I don't even want to. I'm not, because the thing is, when I go into Webby, I'm going to be working in there for like a day or two when I finally do it. And that's part of why I don't want to do it. Right. But, like if you get the PR, I will specifically go in there and do it, because it only takes like an hour or so for me to go through, make the changes, make sure that the PR worked, deploy it, test it in testing, then deploy it to production. Like it's not I mean, in theory it could be shorter than that, right? But realistically it's like an hour. It could be as short as it's a 5-minute thing. All I have to do, I already have a little tool there. All I have to do is run, it's a little script called Webby Review. I do Webby Review, and then I do your GitHub name and your GitHub branch. And then it goes ahead and it pulls it, rebases it on main. And then I just test it in the beta environment, and then I go test it in the prod environment. Let's see if beta's up right now. There's 2. Okay, so beta is not up right now. That's fine. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's not. It's usually up when I'm working on it. Prod better be up. Okay, yeah, prod's up. and that's up. So anyway, but yeah, you can just find something that's similar to stacks in terms of there's actually a matrix. It's one of the pinned issues. There's like a matrix, and it's like, is your binary like this? It's by itself or compressed. It's in a tarball by itself, or it's in a tarball like a package where there's like a, you know, directory structure and a man page and that sort of thing. And then based on that, then you just copy one of the projects that's similar in the matrix, which should probably be like, if you're using Rust, then it'd probably be similar to one of the Rust projects. If you're using Go, it'd probably be similar to one of the Go projects. And so you just copy the config for one of the projects. You do find replace with the name and the version. The version is just there as an example of when was this thing created, basically. Like, this script was created, and at the time it was created, it was version 1.7. The version isn't actually used. It's just there for reference to how to get the version. Anyway, yeah. But yeah, if you personally ping me about it, I will personally do it. And it's been on my it's been on my mind of something to do. It's just my plate has been really full, and like, I've been putting off this because working on this is not directly billable hours, but a project that is a billable project that I need this for, where I don't feel like it's appropriate to bill for this for that project. Anyway, yeah, I got a thing. I got a thing that I'm going to be using this for. This, as far as I can tell, is ready to go into that project, into production. What's not ready is that I can't update the config on the fly without restarting it, and I have to be aware of that. So this is going to get promoted from tls2.b.bnna.net to tls2.m.bnna.net, and yeah. So anyway, let me make sure. Okay, so I'm gonna do. Oh, I don't like that. I don't like that one bit. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna copy this. Gonna get rid of that. Okay. All right, so we're gonna test this real quick. So now this should return fail. I'm going to open up over here. And then let's open up this git config again. Except now it's going to be admin token. And we're going to do like that. Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, I'm going to change some things around, and I'm going to promote this to being a production service shortly. Anyway, no automation. No, so what it automates. So the automation. Well, I mean, it depends what you mean by automation. I need to manually test things because I need to see that the install works, and also I don't accept PRs from just like I review the PRs. Like I want to make sure that there's no malware going in there, right? So uh once I push it in, or like once I and I rebase it off of the current main, because most people don't know how to rebase that, right? So I have a script that does its thing, but there is not an automated way to do this, because if there were, then it wouldn't be necessary, right? Like that's, you know, there are things that could be more automated. Like one thing I'd like to do is have the script heuristically generated based on just opening up the tarball, like just tracking what do I have to do to find the binary. Like here's the name of the thing, here's the GitHub repository, like what's the name of the thing likely to be. Like in the case of ripgrep, you wouldn't necessarily know that the binary name is RG, right? But like you could just start with a URL, and you could heuristically build out what is the mechanism for unpacking the tarball, because there's only like 5 different ways you're going to do it. But yeah, it does not build binaries. It grabs from GitHub releases. So it doesn't do any building. Webby does not have its own releases. Webby just grabs, like, for example, I'll show you this with Go, right? So let's do Webby Go. All right, so if you look here, it says downloading Go from, right? So it's not downloading Go from Webby, it's downloading Go from where Go is. And then I would also have to do, now that I've done that, I got to do Webby Go Essentials and Go, or Vim Go, because since there's a new version of Go, there's some tooling that has to be recompiled. But if we were to do Webby, say, ripgrep, right? Well, look what it's doing. You can see here, it's fetching it from GitHub releases, right? If I do Webby Vim Sensible, all right, it doesn't print it out in this case. So that's actually, it should. It's not printing it out. It should, but it's running Git. So based on what the mechanism is, like when you look at Webby, I'm not going to go into it right now, but there's certain releases providers, releases plugins. So there's a release plugin for GitHub. There's a release plugin for Git. There's a release plugin for GitHub sources. So there's GitHub releases and GitHub sources. Like for example, a POSIX script, a Git tag is a release from source because the POSIX script isn't compiled. But then there's GitHub releases that have binaries. That's a separate thing. So there's GitHub releases, GitHub sources, there's Git source, there's Gitee, and then there's some bespoke ones like Go, Node, Flutter, etc. So that's another thing if I want to do Flutter here. Yeah, exactly. So, right. I get that. Yeah, so you're using GitHub releases. I get that. So yeah, so all that you need to do is just copy the config file and then make a README. Because everything on Webby, and I often end up making the READMEs because project maintainers are usually not very good at articulating why their project is great. That's not always true. Some project maintainers are really good at articulating why their project is great. But for example, ripgrep, the project maintainer is not good at articulating why his project is great. Now, lots of people use ripgrep, but if you look at the README, it's just not like it. This does not explain why ripgrep is good. It's like, okay, it has color. Well, so does every other search tool. Like, okay, great, it has color. All right. How many milliseconds does it take to do a search? Well, who cares, right? Like, I'm grepping through my own code base. Like, milliseconds it takes to search is not a problem. Like, when I blink, it's done. You know, take the slowest grep tool on the list and run it in a project directory, and it's going to be done before you can blink, right? So, well, except for apparently git grep with lc all equals c suspend or whatever. And apparently awk, which I would not think that awk is actually a search tool. But, you know, all the rest of these, like, you blink and it's done, so what does it matter? You literally are not going to be able to tell the difference between grep, hypergrep, and RG with sub 300 milliseconds. Like, yeah, you kind of notice, but you're not, like, 300 milliseconds is a blink. You blink and you miss it, right? So anyway, none of these things, like, you go down and down and down and like, why should I read the blah, 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 you know, and it just is not, and it's just not clear, like, what about this is the good part. Now, if you see somebody using it, you know right away what the good part is. But anyway, so for that purpose, ripgrep is like grep if grep were built for code. It respects .getignore and .ignore and has sensible options you want by default. Like, that's what it is. So, you know, and I actually, this web, this is not really all that great either, to be honest. But, you know, I'm not talking about how is the millisecond, blah, 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 blah. Also, it uses the newer regex, which I don't really mention, but that is kind of, you know, important. But anyway, yeah. So and this is for me and my clients, right? So like when I do some work for a client and I have something up on Webby, it's like, okay, I need clients to know how do you install Node. And so when a client has a problem with something and they're like, wait, what is it that we need to do for blah, 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 blah? I'm like, go to Webby, go to Node. That's how you install it. And then just search on the page for web server or random key or whatever, or caddy. And then I've got your example there for how to do the thing, or serviceman, you know, and I got your example there for how to do the thing. So they're not the best in the world, but they're usually better than what the maintainer provides, at least for my clients, because my clients don't need to know stuff like this, or, you know, people I work with don't need to know how many milliseconds faster is grep than this. People I work with need to know, where's the config file for it, and how do I use it to get connected to the database, or how do I, well, in the case of ripgrep, they're like, they need to know very simple things. And so that's why I have the README goes there too. But if we look at the installer source for this, for example, this one is hosted off of GitHub releases, but the release is one that I release because Postgres, unfortunately, they're from the old guard. They don't believe in binary releases. But this Webby does not build it. I build it under a repo called Postgres releases. And so this is when it fetches the releases, it has to do some modification for the version so that the version can be tracked properly. And then that's all that it does there. So this uses GitHub Git distributables, and then it goes through the distributables on GitHub, and it's like, well, you know, rel 17.0 is not a format that Webby understands, but 17.0 is a format that Webby understands. And so this just modifies the GitHub releases to match a normal format. And then there's two types of muscle. There's hard muscle and soft muscle is what I call it. Hard muscle actually relies on muscle lib C++, whereas soft muscle does not rely on any muscle libraries, like any muscle specific libraries. It's just statically built. So anyway, and then there's the install. And then this is what the install looks like. So this version isn't even used anymore. I think I did use it at one point to be able to figure out, like, is the current version installed the right version? But then I switched over to using symlinking, and so this isn't used. It's just provided for reference, like, and it does come in handy, but that function doesn't actually get called in the code anymore. Like, there's maybe one place where a debug output, it uses it to show the current version or something, but it's not necessary. If it's not there, then it doesn't fail. But this is what the install script looks like. So it's going to figure out how to decompress it, because that can be done heuristically. It's like, it's either Z standard or XZ or zip. Actually, I don't think we support Z standard yet. But, you know, it's either zip, tar, GZ, or XZ. Like, it's one of those things, or a combination of those things. And so heuristically, it determines how to unpack it. And then once it's unpacked, then you have to decide, like, what is it going to go into local opt, or is it going to go into local bin? Like, Postgres has lots of different library files and stuff, so it has to go into local opt. But Stacks probably is just a single binary, hopefully. Or maybe it's a single binary, but it also has documentation, in which case it would still go into opt. Well, actually, you can also put it into local share man, I think, as well. But regardless, like, the two main cases are either it's opt because you've got a number of files that need to be distributed as a package, or local bin if you don't need to distribute it as a package if it's just a single binary. And so you're just defining where is it going to be symlinked to. Like, the final symlink is going to be local opt PSQL. And where is it going to be symlinked from? It's going to be symlinked from local opt PSQL blah, 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 blah. So pretty much the package source always looks like this, and the package dest is either going to have opt or bin, depending on whether it's single or multi. And then it's already going to, package install is going to be run from the folder where it's already been downloaded and decompressed. And so then the job is to say, okay, it's the file that has this prefix, and it's going to go into the folder that has the versioned folder, which is the package source. And then sometimes, because things are weird, sometimes you have to do some sort of corrective action. Like in this case, both the Postgres daemon and the Postgres client ship with a initdb, but initdb actually shouldn't be part of the Postgres client, so it's removed. Yeah, so that's what it looks like. And if you look under the installers, you know, like, let's say, for example, you look under, let's pick one that's simple. GH is really simple. We can go into the install, and this one has both the Windows installer and the POSIX installer. Here's all the POSIX installer is. Make the directory, move it into the directory. That's it. So most of them are this simple. It's just define what directories it should be looking at, and then pull it. And then if we look at GH, there's probably nothing in releases. Yeah, look. So here, releases for GH is well formed. The version format is correct. It has the name in the file name, or in the binary download name. Like, there's nothing that needs to be done for GH, because they use all the standard common conventions when they do the release. So the releases file is literally just saying, use the GitHub binary releases common, and then do nothing. Just as is. And then this is just a little test so that we could see the first 5. So when you run it locally, you can see what it is. But that's how simple they typically are, is just create the folder it goes in, move the file or files into the folder that it goes into. So, anyway. So anyway, I do need to go now. But we got TLS router is in a good place. It's got too many debug statements, but whatever. I'll catch y'all later. Yep. Adios.